There's a strange moment in life that almost everyone experiences at least once, though most people never talk about it. It's the moment you're standing in a room full of people, nodding, smiling, appearing calm, while inside, your mind is running in 100 directions at once. You look composed on the outside, almost unshakable, almost certain of yourself. But beneath the surface, there is a quiet tremor, a subtle fear that someone, anyone, might look at you long enough to notice the truth, that you're not as confident as you appear, that maybe you're just trying to hold yourself together long enough to get through the conversation. Some people have lived in this moment for so long that it feels normal. They've mastered the art of walking into a room with their chin up, shoulders back, eyes steady, while their inner world feels like a storm that refuses to settle. And what's fascinating is this: the psychology behind people who fake confidence is not about deception. It's about survival. It's about trying to navigate a world that rewards certainty and punishes hesitation. A world where appearing unsure can instantly shift how people treat you, listen to you, or even value you. Most people don't fake confidence to impress others. They do it to protect something inside themselves that feels fragile, something they're not ready to expose. And if you've ever felt that way, if you've ever put on a version of yourself that seems stronger than the one you felt, you're not alone. In fact, you're part of a very large, very quiet group of human beings who learned early in life that the world responds differently when you look sure of yourself, even when you're not. What makes this so interesting is that the people who fake confidence are often some of the most self-aware individuals you'll meet. They know exactly how they feel. They know their insecurities. They know their fears. They're just not ready to let the world see them. So they build an outer layer, a kind of emotional armor, made of calm expressions, steady words, and practiced smiles. But behind that armor, there's usually a story. Sometimes it begins in childhood, where a person learns that showing hesitation means getting overlooked. Maybe they grew up in a home where they had to appear stronger than they felt just to be heard. Maybe they were compared constantly to someone else, someone louder, more charismatic, more naturally confident. Or maybe they watched people around them fall apart whenever they expressed self-doubt, so they made themselves the opposite, composed, steady, put together. Other times, the story begins later in life, after a failure that stung too deeply, or a moment of embarrassment that stayed in the memory longer than it should have. One moment can be enough to convince the mind that vulnerability is dangerous, and so people fake confidence not because they want to, but because they think it's safer than showing their real fears. What's even more fascinating is how convincing these people usually are. Behavioral psychology shows that humans are incredibly good at masking emotions, sometimes better than they realize. Studies show that most people can control their facial expressions better than they think. Even the simple act of holding eye contact or steadying your voice can give the impression of certainty, even if your heart is beating faster than normal. And because the world responds so positively to these signals, the behavior becomes reinforced. Eventually, it becomes a habit. But here's the part most people don't understand. Faking confidence isn't the same as being dishonest. It's a form of self-protection. It's an internal whisper that says, I'm not ready to show everything yet. And that's okay, because beneath every person who fakes confidence is someone who cares deeply, someone who wants to show up fully in life, but hasn't yet figured out how to feel safe doing so. When you look closely at their psychology, you begin to see patterns. People who fake confidence often notice everything. They pick up on small details. They sense the mood of a room within seconds. They adjust themselves quickly. Their minds are constantly scanning for signs: approval, rejection, expectations, pressure. And because they're so observant, they can mimic confidence almost effortlessly. They know how confident people stand, talk, and move. They've studied it through years of watching others. But the truth is, many of them struggle with something deeper. The fear of being misunderstood, the fear of disappointing others, the fear of not being enough, and the fear of being seen too clearly, too deeply, too honestly. In a world where confidence is treated like a form of currency, Some people try to earn their place through appearance rather than genuine self-belief. And the ironic part? Many of them are far more capable than they realize. Their lack of confidence is not about skill. It's about internal narratives shaped over years. Narratives that tell them to be careful, to appear stronger, to avoid being exposed. But if you look closer, there's something even more profound happening beneath the surface. People who fake confidence often have a beautiful kind of humility. They don't assume they're the smartest in the room. They don't overestimate their abilities. They are constantly learning, constantly improving, constantly refining themselves. Their insecurity pushes them to grow in ways that naturally confident people might not. And in a strange way, their fake confidence is actually a sign of their hope, a sign that they want to rise into a version of themselves they believe is possible, even if they're not there yet. They're not pretending to be someone they're not. They're trying to become who they hope they can be. But the emotional cost can be heavy. Pretending to be completely fine when you're not can feel exhausting. It can feel lonely. It can feel like carrying an invisible weight. And sometimes people who fake confidence find themselves wishing someone could see through the veneer. Not to expose them, but to understand them. Because deep down, they're not trying to hide. They're trying to survive. If you've ever met someone who looked incredibly composed, but seemed strangely tense around their eyes or shoulders, you were probably seeing this quiet inner tension. Many people who fake confidence have what psychologists call controlled expression, a calm outer appearance created by consciously managing their body language. Their posture is deliberate. Their tone is measured. They don't interrupt. They don't show panic even when they feel it. They've learned to look stable even when their emotions are moving fast. But what makes them so compelling is that they often care deeply about other people's feelings. They don't want to burden anyone. They don't want to come across as dramatic or overwhelming. So they choose the safer option, appearing strong. This can create a strange paradox. On one hand, they might be perceived as assertive, independent, or even unshakable. But on the other hand, they might feel invisible in their struggles. Because when you appear strong for too long, people stop asking if you're okay. They assume you always are, and that assumption can create a quiet loneliness that goes unnoticed. Yet, despite the emotional burden, faking confidence can also lead to unexpected growth. Over time, the outer confidence they project starts to change their inner reality. Something known in psychology as self-perception theory suggests that we often learn who we are by watching our own behavior. When someone consistently acts confident, their mind starts adjusting to match the behavior. Eventually, the line between acting confident and actually being confident becomes blurry. This is why many people who fake confidence end up becoming genuinely confident later in life. The outer performance slowly becomes inner truth. It's not deception, it's practice, it's repetition. It's the mind catching up to the version of the self a person has been rehearsing. But there's another side to this story, one that sits quietly beneath the surface. People who fake confidence often carry a softness inside them, a sensitivity they don't always feel safe showing. They feel deeply, they care deeply, they absorb emotions quickly, and sometimes their attempt to appear strong is really an attempt to protect that softness, not because it's weakness, but because it feels precious, fragile, easily misunderstood. When you talk to them long enough, you begin to notice something. They're often brilliant thinkers. They analyze their own behavior. They're introspective. They question themselves, sometimes too much. They replay conversations. They think about how they could have spoken better, stood better, behaved better. Their self-awareness is almost too strong at times. And while self-awareness can be a gift, it can also create overthinking. That overthinking is often what drives the need to appear confident. Because if someone constantly evaluates themselves, they learn quickly how others might evaluate them too. And instead of being judged, they decide to control the narrative. Still, beneath all of this, there is a quiet longing. A longing to be understood without having to appear perfect. A longing to express uncertainty without feeling judged. A longing to be accepted with all the layers, the strong ones and the fragile ones. What's remarkable is that many people who fake confidence don't realize how inspiring they actually are. They move through life with fear in their hearts, but courage in their actions. They walk into difficult situations even when their inner voice trembles. They show up again and again, even when they feel unprepared or unworthy. That isn't fake confidence, that's resilience, that's strength, that's courage disguised as calmness. And maybe that's the real truth here. People who fake confidence aren't pretending to be strong. They're practicing strength every day, quietly, internally, without applause or recognition. They're building themselves piece by piece from the inside out. For many people who fake confidence, this internal conflict becomes a familiar part of life. They walk through the world balancing two realities, the one they show and the one they carry. And though these two versions of themselves may seem different, they're actually deeply connected. One is the shield, and the other is the reason the shield exists. A lot of people don't realize how early this behavior begins. The roots often form long before adulthood. A child who learns that hesitating makes them an easy target grows up learning to speak with certainty even when they feel unsure. A teenager who feels overlooked learns to appear more outgoing so they don't disappear into the background. A young adult who experiences rejection learns to hold their emotions closer, to avoid being vulnerable again. And as the years pass, these protective habits become personality traits, even though they weren't originally meant to be. Psychologists often talk about something called compensatory behavior. It's when a person instinctively builds a skill or habit to protect themselves from a weakness they fear. In the case of people who fake confidence, the compensatory behavior is strength. The weakness they fear is being misunderstood, undervalued, or exposed, and so they build a version of themselves that feels safer to present to the world. What's interesting is that the outer confidence they project is rarely exaggerated. They don't act like they're superior or flawless. Instead, they carry a quiet confidence, a calmness that feels believable. And that's because it isn't a complete performance. It's a blend of real strength and hidden fear. They're not pretending to be someone else. They're amplifying the parts of themselves that feel safe while protecting the parts that feel fragile. But this balancing act creates a unique psychological experience. They often live with a subtle fear that someone might see the cracks, that someone might look closely enough to notice the uncertainty behind their eyes, and because they don't want anyone to feel worried, they work even harder to appear fine. This can create a cycle where the more they hide their insecurities, the heavier those insecurities feel. There's also an emotional exhaustion that comes with constantly managing your own image. People who fake confidence often describe feeling tired after social interactions, not because they're pretending to be someone else, but because they're maintaining a version of themselves they feel safer showing. They monitor their voice, their expressions, their posture. They replay conversations afterward, checking for mistakes no one else even noticed. They're incredibly self-aware, sometimes to a fault. But beneath all of this effort, there is something profoundly human. The desire to be respected, the desire to be taken seriously, the desire to be seen as capable. And these desires aren't foolish or shallow, they're deeply rooted in human psychology. Humans respond to confidence. It shapes opportunities, relationships, and first impressions. Faking confidence is, in many ways, a way of giving yourself a chance in a world that doesn't always wait for you to grow at your own pace. What makes this even more remarkable is that the people who fake confidence are often the ones with the most potential for genuine inner strength. Their insecurities don't come from lack of ability. They come from a mind that feels deeply and thinks carefully. Their sensitivity makes them insightful. Their self-awareness makes them reflective. Their fear of being misunderstood makes them thoughtful. These traits, when nurtured instead of hidden, can become sources of authentic power. But this transformation doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, often through moments that don't feel significant at first. It happens when someone expresses emotion and the world doesn't fall apart. It happens when they take a small risk and it turns out better than expected. It happens when someone sees them clearly, not the persona, and accepts them anyway. And with each moment of acceptance, the shield they've built becomes a little lighter. One of the most powerful shifts occurs when they realize that confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to move forward despite the fear. And suddenly, the thing they thought they were faking becomes something they are genuinely practicing. They begin to understand that confidence is not something a person is born with. It's something that is built piece by piece through courage, consistency, and self-respect. There's also a moment, often subtle, when a person stops performing confidence and starts embodying it. They start speaking a little more freely. They stop rehearsing every sentence in their mind. They begin to let go of the need to impress. They stop trying to appear perfect and instead focus on being present. This shift doesn't eliminate their insecurities, but it transforms their relationship with them. Instead of fighting their fears, they learn to carry them with grace. And something unexpected happens during this transformation. The very fear that once made them fake confidence becomes the reason they develop real confidence. Their insecurity becomes fuel for growth. Their sensitivity becomes a source of emotional intelligence. Their self-awareness becomes a tool for authentic expression. The parts of themselves they once hid become the parts that make them strong. But to understand this transformation fully, you have to understand something deeper about human psychology. People don't fake confidence because they want to deceive others. They do it because they're trying to meet the expectations they believe the world has of them. And those expectations can feel heavy. They can feel overwhelming. They can make a person feel like they have to constantly prove themselves. When someone grows up hearing phrases like, be strong, don't show weakness, or keep it together, they internalize the idea that vulnerability is dangerous. They learn that emotional expression must be controlled, that uncertainty must be hidden, that fear must be masked. And while these lessons may help them navigate difficult situations, they also create emotional habits that can be hard to break. But the truth is, vulnerability isn't weakness. It's one of the most powerful forms of courage a person can show. It's the courage to be seen as you are. And for people who fake confidence, learning this truth can be life-changing. When they realize that they don't have to choose between strength and honesty, that they can be both strong and human, they begin to experience a deeper form of self-acceptance. This self-acceptance is not loud or dramatic. It's quiet. It's gentle. It's the kind of acceptance that feels like finally being able to breathe without holding your chest tight. It feels like being able to say, I don't know, without feeling ashamed. It feels like being able to ask for help without feeling guilty. It feels like letting yourself be imperfect. Not because imperfection is ideal, but because imperfection is real. And once a person reaches this place, their confidence becomes something completely different. It becomes grounded, stable, organic. It doesn't need to be performed. It doesn't need to be forced. It doesn't need to be defended. It simply exists quietly and naturally as part of who they are. But this doesn't mean the journey ends. Even people with genuine confidence feel insecure sometimes. Even people who have grown emotionally still feel nervous in new situations. Even the strongest individuals have moments where they question themselves. The difference is that they no longer see these moments as failures. They see them as part of being human. One of the most profound realizations comes when someone who has spent years faking confidence suddenly notices that they no longer need to. Maybe they're in a conversation and they speak without overthinking. Maybe they make a decision without second-guessing themselves. Maybe they express a small vulnerability and the world responds with understanding rather than judgment. These moments are subtle, almost ordinary, but they represent years of inner work unfolding silently. In relationships, this transformation becomes especially visible. People who once hid their emotions begin to open up. They communicate with more honesty, more clarity, more presence. They don't feel the need to pretend everything is okay. They don't feel pressured to always be calm. They allow themselves to be human. And this authenticity creates deeper connections, relationships built on trust rather than performance. In work environments, they begin to speak up without fearing they'll be judged. They share their ideas. They accept feedback without internalizing it as criticism. They stop comparing themselves to others and start measuring themselves by their own growth. Their confidence becomes a quiet presence rather than a protective mask. In their inner world, the shift is even more profound. They begin to talk to themselves differently. Their inner voice becomes kinder, less critical, more patient. Instead of saying, you need to be perfect, it says you're trying and that's enough. Instead of saying, don't mess this up, it says, you'll figure it out. This change in inner dialogue is one of the clearest signs that fake confidence has transformed into something real. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this journey is that the person they become is not the person they once pretended to be. It's someone better, someone wiser, someone more grounded, someone who understands both strength and softness, someone who can walk into a room with confidence not because they need to impress anyone, but because they know who they are. And that's the heart of the psychology behind people who fake confidence. They're not trying to deceive the world. They're trying to believe in themselves. They're trying to grow into the version of themselves they hope exists somewhere inside. They're practicing courage every single day, even when no one notices. And with time, practice becomes reality. The mask becomes unnecessary. The shield becomes lighter. And the person who once felt the need to appear strong begins to feel strong. Truly, deeply, quietly strong. If you look closely at them, you'll see something extraordinary. Behind the practiced expressions and steady posture, there is a heart that has survived fear, doubt, and uncertainty. There is a mind that has spent years learning how to protect itself. There is a soul that still hopes to be understood. And there is a strength that was there all along, just waiting to be felt, not performed. And maybe that's the real story here. Maybe the psychology of people who fake confidence is not about pretending. Maybe it's about becoming. Maybe it's about moving from fear toward courage, from uncertainty toward clarity, from self-doubt toward self-respect. Maybe what looks like a mask is actually a bridge, a way of getting from who a person is to who they're becoming. And if that's true, then people who fake confidence aren't hiding. They're growing, slowly, quietly, brave in ways they don't even realize, practicing strength until it becomes real, carrying their fears with dignity, and learning, step by step, how to believe in themselves.